MyGovWatch Live, the B2G Roundtable. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains here in the U.S., good afternoon. Good morning to those out west, and hello to anyone joining us from the far corners of the earth or watching online in the future. Today is Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. This series is brought to you by MyGovWatch.com. MyGovWatch.com is revolutionizing traditional bid notification and matching by providing RFP leads in more than 200 industries using proprietary artificial intelligence at double the rate of free government sites and at a fraction of the cost of legacy websites. Big government contracts do not start with a solicitation, but all roads lead to one, and your budget for hearing about RFPs does not have to be thousands of dollars per year. Start your 14-day free trial today. Today, we have an all-star cast of panelists. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome. So we have attendees still joining us, and we're going to do something fun with our panelists today, folks. We have 5 people who can answer questions, 3 from the Apex Accelerator community, Nicole Potroff, an attorney. And I'm just going to say a fact about each of the people who are panelists today. One of the panelists today has a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo. And for the panelists, please do not give any indication if it's you. One of our panelists has a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo. Another makes their own stained glass. Another has not 1, but 2 holes-in-one on golf courses. Another regularly catches yellowtail off the coast of the Coronado Islands in Mexico. And one of our participants is a semi-professional kickball player. So when I call on you and when you participate, I might ask you to guess, and we'll have a little fun with that. So I'm going to read a few bios. And folks, I shortened the bios a little bit just because there are 4 of them. So we're going to start with Robert. Robert, you could just raise your hand. Robert Moraro is the procurement specialist for Del Mar College Apex Accelerator's rural clients in the 13 counties outside of Corpus Christi, Texas. He's a certified procurement professional, a certified public manager, and has been in the public sector for 14 years. Robert is knowledgeable about all aspects of educational and municipal procurement regulations. He's been a SCORE mentor. He was also a certified verification assistance counselor with the VA. So thank you for joining us, Robert. Kathy Lindquist is the senior procurement specialist at the North Dakota Apex Accelerator in Fargo. She's designated as a Center for Verification and Evaluation Certified Verification Assistance Counselor, as well as a certified procurement professional. Kathy has over 35 years of experience in business management, marketing, contracting, strategy, and operations. So thank you for joining us, Kathy. Mike Sabelico is the Regional Director of the Imperial PTAC Apex Accelerator in San Diego, California. He has over 30 years of diverse work experience in leading programs, managing multi-million-dollar budgets and assets, and improving quality and processes. He is a 20-year veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard, so thanks for your service, Mike. After leaving the Coast Guard, Mike managed a business development program for a San Diego-based defense contractor with offices throughout the U.S. In 2010, he launched Vanguard Global Solutions, a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business specializing in homeland security, emergency preparedness, and specialized business consulting. And Nicole Potroff, who is not joining us by video today, but will be with us during the session. Nicole is a partner at nationally renowned GovCon law firm Coprince McCall Potroff. She exclusively practices federal government contract law. Nicole works with clients on a wide variety of transactional matters, from organizational contracts to teaming arrangements, and advises clients on compliance with small business and procurement regulations and statutes. Nicole assists clients with litigation matters, including bid protests at the GAO and size and status protests at the U.S. Small Business Administration. So welcome, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. And we have lots of folks who have joined us and several more, I'm sure, who are on the way. So, folks, I'm going to start with a question that came in from someone who could not join us, but who is a user at our website at MyGovWatch and who desperately wanted some information about this particular area of an RFP. So this comes from MyGovWatch user Georgia Hill. And I'm going to throw the question at you first, Nicole, and then anyone else can chime in. So this has to do with a rebranding RFP in New York State at the county level, where the proposal or the RFP states The proposal cover letter must indicate the proposal constitutes a valid, binding, and continuing offer at the prices set forth in the proposal for a period of 60 days from the deadline for acceptance of proposals as set forth herein. So George is wondering, does this mean there is no negotiation on cost if the proposal is accepted? And how should this affect how her pricing is structured? So Nicole, have at it, and then anyone else, please chime in.
Absolutely. And thanks for the great intro. And yes, I will start with that one. It's a fantastic question and one that we see a lot. And generally, Georgia, I believe, right, is on point that is going to be a pretty difficult situation to negotiate any kind of changes to the cost later on. So I'm going to direct you to FAR subpart 16.2021, and it discusses that a firm fixed price contract is not subject to any adjustment on the basis of the contractor's cost experience in performing the contract. This places upon the contractor maximum risk and full responsibility for all costs and resulting profit or loss. It provides maximum incentive for the contractor to control costs and perform effectively, and imposes a minimum administrative burden on the contracting parties. So the contracting officer can use this in conjunction with other types of awards when it's based solely on factors other than cost. Now, that all said, is there never ever a situation where you can negotiate some changes to cost and price where you have a firm fixed price contract? I would not go that far. There are some situations, typically those would be ones that are outside of the contractor's control, that are pretty extreme, that aren't simple fluctuations that you should at least be able to reasonably foresee when it comes to things like cost of materials. And it's going to be that next one, that's FAR 16.202. That is going to talk about the application of this FAR clause and how it works. I won't read you all the case citations, but generally what the case law does say about it is there are some situations where you will be able to have equitable adjustments in this situation. And it is often if the government causes some kind of delay or causes some kind of interference, where there's something going on the government side of things that results in additional cost to the contractor. Trying to make the argument that, say, cost of materials went up, staffing became difficult, even a national disaster, even COVID, things like that are still going to be pretty difficult to argue in these situations, just because that firm fixed price is used for a reason, and that reason is to ensure that the contractor is assuming the maximum risk. So yes, you need to very, very much consider potential fluctuations in things when it comes to proposing your firm fixed prices. Now, if there is something that goes on, the majority of the case law indicates that it would need to be something kind of caused by the government. If it were caused by the government in any way, or there's an argument that potentially, another contractor hired by the government interfered, something to that extent, then there's a chance you can have adjustments, but I wouldn't count on them. They're very, very hard to get. And in our experience, I will say, and this is where I will definitely hand this off to those that don't give you the strict reading of the laws and tell you to follow every single law all the time, no matter what, but actually give you more of a, in practice, this is how this law is interpreted and this is what we see. I have had some clients tell me in the past that they have been very, very cautious when making firm fixed price proposals, and they felt that they were the only one that did so, and they felt that their pricing was not as competitive as it could have been because others were not being quite as risky with their pricing. So a lot of it is going to come down to talking to experts in that industry, getting to know kind of what is standard, what kind of foreseeable issues are common. If you are newer, I highly recommend talking to, of course, your PTAC, your Apex Accelerator, talking to someone like Nick, talking to other types of consultants that can talk to you more about the business side of what the risks of proposing certain costs are, both the risks of not providing a competitive cost and also the risks of providing a highly competitive cost and ending up taking your contract at a loss. So that's kind of where my expertise ends, and I'll turn it over to anyone else that has thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in and say that I think that's an outstanding analysis of federally what happens. Who would like to chime in about if this is a local RFP, say a county RFP. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I'm going to go back to the federal side for a second because, Nicole, she definitely talked about the letter of the law and, what could happen based on the FAR. I've seen, because of the high inflation rates, particularly with the VA and some DoD customers, the ability to get adjustments on firm fixed price contracts because of unforeseen, higher transportation costs, higher costs for commodities. Now it's totally luck of the draw. I've had some clients be able to get those adjustments in a very reasonable fashion from the government. And I've had some that the government was like, too bad, this was a firm fixed price contract and therefore there's no adjustments. Her last statement about, being careful about the pricing is on, on target. The worst thing you can do is win the contract and then be losing money. So my advice to my clients is price it the way you need to price it so that you can make money. And if you don't win, then you don't win, and you're not the unlucky one that's won a contract and is now losing money. From the state side in California, it's very similar to the federal government. They're not going to change the contract pricing because of inflation or things that they think you should have foresaw. I had an interesting argument from one client with the VA and they won. Nicole will laugh at this. They said that the inflation was as a result of the government mismanaging funds. So, and they particularly blamed the president, but that's not normal. But that's, those are the conundrums you have. So my advice is price it so you can make money. Don't use the firm fixed price, and multiple year contracts are even harder. Like if you're bidding out a 5-year contract, how do you know what the inflation rate is going to be in 5 years? So you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, Nick, I would also add, and certainly a great explanation by Nicole and good information by Mike, is that the way I would advise Georgia, she was my client, would be first and foremost, when you have these kinds of questions, there's a question and answer period that's allowed based on how the RFP timeline is written. So this is one of those wonderful opportunities to reach out, to get known and to network or start getting yourself on the radar of these buying officials at these local agencies, but more specifically to ask that question so that you can have a very clear understanding of whether or not, like has been mentioned, you have to suppress the final price with all your direct and indirect costs already rolled in, either for today or whatever you anticipate into the future, or whether or not the way I particularly read that clause was that the prices that she is putting forth in her proposal response, and if she's awarded the contract, must remain whatever it is that she puts in that proposal until such day as 60 days elapse. Once you're 60 days into the contract award, it's my understanding that she then has the opportunity to enter into some kind of a conversation with her contracting officer or official at the county to be able to see if there needs to be some kind of an adjustment in her pricing.
Absolutely. Kathy, anything to add on that? And it's not required.
No, actually, those three answered it very well. So nothing to add.
Okay. All right. So Georgia, thank you for that question, even though you couldn't join us today. And I'm just going to sort of read off a few names of folks who we're going to be calling on. And when we call on you folks, we need at a minimum your audio. Video is always better. So Chris Faust, we're coming to you next. Christine Gamez, Edward Chavan, Olivia, Rick, Ryan. So all of you are in the pipeline. And let's start with Chris Faust. So Chris, I'm going to try to make you a co-presenter in order to do this, or a panelist. So Chris, you should receive a prompt to accept a new role as a panelist. All right, Chris, I see you're a panelist. Now we just need at least your audio or audio with video. Hey, Chris, welcome to MyGovWatch Live. What do you do and where do you do it from? We need your audio. Just your audio? Yes, we're just not hearing you.
He's working on it. He's working on it.
Yep. Okay.
How about that?
That is perfect, Chris. Welcome to
Okay.
MyGovWatch Live. What do you do and where do you do it from?
Well, first off, you can tell I'm not a highly technical guy because I can't even turn on my microphone.
Well, I had some trouble before we started, so that's just fine.
I work in the entertainment industry. It's not always been my vocation, but it's been my passion since the 1960s. So you can tell I'm an old guy.
Well, welcome. And I see it looks like maybe you have some records behind you. I have a question for you before we get to your questions.
Okay.
Which of the panelists do you believe makes their own stained glass?
I'm going to say Kathy Lindquist.
That's going to be incorrect, but that's all right. You can stay with us. We're going to field.
Oh no! No! Don't tell me she's the Taekwondo person.
Nope, no comment. No comment. Everyone's going to get a chance to guess.
Both my son and my daughter are training in Taekwondo.
Well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic, and you know, that would be in addition to the other fighting styles you've taught them over the years.
Yeah, word of mouth being one of them.
So you had questions, I think, around how does the government procure, or what mechanisms does the government use to procure entertainment services? So let's just assume you mean federally, but this could also be state and local as well. So how would you phrase the question?
I think you phrased it perfectly. I think that the reason I got inspired to join this group was because I was reached out to by another agent who had some options in various Middle Eastern countries on military bases to bring over American talent. So I worked on that. I didn't actually get the contract, but I thought, well, there's a ancillary source of bookings and of revenue that I'm not privy to. So that's why I'm here.
Well, it's a great question. And do we have a volunteer to talk a little bit about how the federal government might procure entertainment services and the different, tiers of spending and what might be involved in that?
I can start.
Great.
So what I would recommend, first of all, is do your research on past history. Who has been buying it? That will include what it's called a NAICS code. It's a classification that all contracts are under. Each one gets a code. And so everything they buy has a code associated. So if you can find that code, and again, it takes a while to research, and I would recommend connecting with your local ABTAC / PTAC, going through the name change, because they can show you how to search and make it more valuable, more efficient for you. So
I don't know these acronyms.
Okay, so the first one, NAICS code, is let's see if I can get it straight here. The National Industry, National American Industry Standard Classification. I think I got a couple of those mixed up.
Well, that's good enough for government work?
Yeah.
One of those is like you don't use it, that's the one you don't use very often. And of course, Apex and PTAC are who the three of us are from. This is a organization that provides no cost advising related to government contract, not just federal, though our money comes from the Department of Defense to our states, to our host organizations. We provide that no cost advising. They want more businesses selling products and services to the government. So that's why we are here. We were formed in 1985 for this purpose. So it's no cost advising. With that, we have training events. We also have a bid match and so on. I'll get to bid match in a moment. So one is doing a history, is, during the search. And there's various sites you can do the searches on. There's a lot of changes going on in our federal government right now. I don't know what state you're in. You said New York, correct?
I'm actually in Mike Sabilico's town of San Diego, California.
Oh, San Diego. So there you go. You connect with Mike there, and so that he can help you target in on those. and sign up for the services. And then I know that Mike also has a bid match service. And then what that is it searches databases, just like the GovWatch. They can find those and use a keyword. You create a profile, and then those matches come to you on a daily basis. Oh, and here we
Interesting.
go. North American Industry Classification Systems. There we go.
North American Industry Classification System.
Yes. Yep.
But
But if you just look up,
NAC what?
yeah, there you go. And it looks like Mike's got some information for you too. So
Okay.
Yeah, so happy to have you as a client, and I'll give you my email and you can get how to sign up to become a client. But I looked at your NACE codes that you're looking at, and they are the first one is agents and managers for artists, athletes, entertainers, and other public figures, and that is 711410. And the second one would be independent artists, writers, and performers, 711510. And then the two sites that I'd recommend looking at, as well as signing up for a bid match, would be fpds.gov, Foxtrot Papa Delta Sierra.gov, the Federal Procurement Data System. And that's where the government posts, what they've awarded, who they've awarded it to, and how much they've paid. And that goes back for years. And then usaspending.gov is another good site, as well as, Nick's site, GovWatch. It's phenomenal. So, between all those, you should be able to get some. I'm going to tell you that there's not a whole lot out there that the federal government's going to purchase in this arena. But there are opportunities. And when I was in the Coast Guard, when we purchased entertainment, it was normally purchased by the person throwing the event, not the actual U.S. Coast
Right.
Guard. So you'll see a lot of that. When I retired, I hired a band and I paid for the band. When you have morale, welfare, and recreation events for DOD, normally it's paid out of MWR funds, not operating funds. So it's a little bit different, but there's certainly opportunities out there, and happy to help you.
Just a question. I wonder for the folks on this call, do we think that Chris would benefit from knowing about the subnet directory for subcontracting? And would this be something that maybe could be part of a larger event spend?
I mean, it could, Nick, potentially one of those things that we never discourage by any means anybody looking, rather than trying to go after everything on your own, sometimes it makes better sense to try to go find ways to team or to partner or to subcontract, because, a little bit of something much larger is much better than nothing at all. So, it might be a better play, for several different reasons. Either because you don't have the scalability or the ability to handle what they're asking for, or it could be that that particular niche or piece of whatever may not be enough business for the company that may be winning the award, and they're not interested in it. So they're looking for people like you to be able, Chris, to fill that backfill and to be able to provide that to you. To piggyback on what Mike said real quick, that was the first thought I had was, it depends, Chris, as what Kathy mentioned from your doing your homework and your market research, is what are you wanting to do in terms of, do you want to bring the troops to the combat zones and allow them to do the things like Bob Hope and all those folks used to do? Because on the one hand, I would probably argue the fact, and I don't know if this is still the case, but it's not the federal government that's doing that, but maybe the USO or some other organization that's actually hosting that, sponsoring and paying for. The other part of that would be if you're wanting to do these kinds of things that they do on base, where they're doing the, appreciation days or whatever, that's going to come through MWR. And so you'd want to go out there and meet those MWR folks, morale, welfare, recreation, to establish a relationship and find out what they buy and how often they buy it if you're not able to find it. Because if it's under $25,000, they can purchase it with a government purchasing card. That's never going to be shown on a one of these websites that we've mentioned to you, because it's what's considered to be a micro purchase, for lack of a better term. So those kinds of things are just, you got to kick the rocks over and see what's underneath and see where it take, what rabbit hole leads you down.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and
the ones that I worked on in the past were, well, as I mentioned, through through another agency, so I became a sub-agent for them. And those were in, they were in rather frontline positions in friendly countries. So we had to adapt to offering mostly male. We weren't going to send a trio of harmonizing ladies out to live in a tent for 3 days in a sandy place, you know. But those seem to be, well, like, I couldn't tell because I was subcontracting, but they seem to be being looked for by the military agency that was associated with that group. In this case, it was the Army. So is there any level of research I could do that has to do with the individual services?
I think that might go back to doing some research on a website such as usaspending.gov, and you can use the NAICS code. And by the way, just for anyone listening, anything said on this webinar will be on YouTube in several days, so don't feel like you have to frantically write something down. You might just jot down how far into the webinar we were when it was said. But usaspending.gov, you can look up that NAICS code and see which agencies are buying under that NAICS code. And you and I can have an offline conversation if you'd like about how often you would be going out to SamGov for purchases that are larger. Because if it's a larger purchase, you mentioned, you know, when we spoke earlier that it could be up to a $500,000 fee for some acts, there would certainly be a procurement for something like that. So we can have an offline conversation about that.
Oh, thank you.
And Chris, please stay with us. And folks, if you have a question, if I hadn't spoken to you prior to today, you can raise your hand. Rachel, I see that you've raised your hand. We will call on you. Did we have someone else who wanted to comment? Okay. So Chris, stay with us. And as we answer others' questions, if you want to come back to us, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm just going to put you back in as an attendee. All right. And you're still with us. So I'm just going to read a brief spot, folks. So about Fed support, if you're a current or aspiring government contractor, you know the challenges of proposal development and the costs that come with it. But what if there was a way to dramatically reduce your costs by saving time? Fed support offers tailored custom proposal outlines in Microsoft Word, guaranteed to be 100% compliant with solicitation instructions and requirements. Are you ready to take your government contract proposals to the next level? Look no further than Fed Support. Visit fedsupport.com. That's www.fed-support.com and do it today. So we have several other folks with us. I know that Anthony Gallo joined us late. Anthony, I'll see if you're still here with us. Looks like you dropped off. Let's see if we have Christine. We sometimes have folks that jump on and jump off. Rick Smith, I know that you had some questions. I'm going to promote you and see if you can join us. And Rick, you'll just, there we go. Are you there?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Morning.
Welcome, Rick. What do you do and where do you do it from?
So I am a business development director for a company based out in California. They're called Technology Associates, TKA for short. And what we do is that we provide medical equipment service and management programs for healthcare facilities. So primarily for hospitals. So it's biomedical or clinical engineering services for hospitals.
Well, that's fantastic. We know there's a big market for that. And before we go further, I'm just curious. Hopefully you were with us in the beginning of the webinar. We're asking you to guess on certain panelist questions. So which of the panelists do you believe regularly catches yellowtail off the coast of the Coronado Islands in Mexico?
Oh, I'll say Robert.
That is incorrect, but thanks for trying. All right, so I know, Rick, you had some questions about what's available for medical equipment service contracts? Like, where would you find those? How would you characterize what you're looking to find out today?
Yeah, so and actually the earlier answer already started to provide some resources. I know you talked about the ICS coach, which I already started to do some research, and so I'm trying to locate where we would find solicitations for service contracts for medical equipment, ideally for on-site medical equipment service in the I guess it would be in the VA and DoD hospitals. And so we're trying to locate where we would find those solicitations, and then how we would participate in those requests.
Maybe I'll do this for the panelists, for the sake of the panelists, because we have covered that a little bit. Can we talk a little bit about things you should do before finding the RFP, and then maybe we'll come back to that. So, like, what are some things we would recommend to Rick prior to an RFP coming out? Go ahead, Mike. Why don't you come off mute? There we go.
So the VA NCO 22 out here, the Small Business Liaison, Jay, has a forecast that you can take a look at of available opportunities coming up. I would also say that you're doing your research on FPDS, finding out what has been purchased in the past would be valuable.
And what was the source for that?
FPDS.gov, Foxtrot Papa Delta Sierra.gov. And you can search by VA, you could search by geographic region. Some of the information is dated, so you're gonna try to get the more recent stuff. But the forecast of opportunities is valuable. I see a lot of those because I had a disabled veteran-owned business, so they still send me these solicitations. Is your company a service disabled veteran-owned company or not?
We are not.
Okay.
We are. Yeah, we're looking to see if we fall into a small business classification, but we are not. Okay. Service disabled.
So you are at a slight disadvantage with the VA because they have their veterans first contracting policy. So they're supposed to purchase it from a disabled veteran-owned company if there are two or more disabled veteran companies that can provide the product or service at a fair and reasonable price. But that forecast is good. Maybe find some disabled veteran companies that you could be a subcontractor to, even though they're a little bit smaller than you. It's the inverse relationship. And as Nick said earlier, 49% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And then, in California, they've got a lot of state hospitals as well. So there's a lot of state work. You look at Cali Procure, you look at the procurement opportunities that are coming up. There's a database called Skippers, and I forget what the acronym is, but that's where they tell you about what they've purchased in the past. And just try to locate those buyers or those small business people, if you're going to be a small business, that will help you with that specific agency, looking into the future and how to work with that agency. And then obviously, when you come to the solicitation, there's different strategies as well.
If I could jump in for 1 second, I think Mike gave some great advice. And one other option, aside from subcontracting with a SDVOSB, is joint venturing with a SDVOSB. So finding yourself a service disabled veteran-owned small business that believes they can do the work, but maybe not quite all of the work, and actually proposing that they joint venture with you versus subcontract to you might have some benefits for you kind of getting into the industry and getting your feet wet in what VA is looking for. As a small business, you can joint venture with a SDVOSB without a mentor-protege agreement. So you really don't even have anything you need to get approved or anything like that. You simply execute a compliant joint venture. I will strictly advise that you make sure that is a compliant joint venture. If it's not, you could risk losing awards and things like that. So don't go find a template. Definitely have an attorney or someone help you with that. Typically only a couple hours, nothing crazy. It's not a huge commitment as far as like legal fees fees or anything go, at least for my firm. But getting a joint venture, it benefits you in a few ways. One is that you actually are a prime contractor. You're a co-prime. So you and the other company are both prime contractors, and you get to kind of piggyback off their status as an SDVOSB, and your whole joint venture qualifies as an SDVOSB, again, if you meet all those rules. Now, the additional benefit there is for a limitation on subcontracting for a services contract, it's going to be 50%. So you can do up to 50% of the work. For a joint venture, as the non-managing venture, so the SDVOSB will have to manage things and own the majority of the joint venture, but you can actually, as the non-managing venture, do up to 60% of the work. And there are a couple differences, other differences. I will shamelessly plug our blog real quick, which is the SmallGovCon blog. I will post a link as well in the chat. I did a 3-part series that took me a really long time to write, so I definitely recommend you go read it. But it is essentially a comparison of the major differences between joint venturing and subcontracting, and it's called Picking Your Teams, and it talks about what to consider as far as work share, past performance. There's some very interesting things in there about past performance, both what you can use for past performance bidding as a JV and what you can use going forward from your experience with the JV. And then I think the third one was about relationships, both with the government and the other party. So keep that in mind. That is a really fantastic way that we see small businesses that for whatever reason don't qualify for SDVOSB, or maybe they used to and a veteran retires or something like that, still getting lots of good VA work is by doing those joint ventures.
Good. Is there anywhere that would provide a resource for where those SDVSOBs would be? Do they promote themselves anywhere?
Actually, you can find them in a couple different databases. One is sam.gov, and that's going to house a lot of the federal contracting. There's also it's an SBA profile, or at DSBS, Dynamic Small Business Search. It is a place where small businesses, if they choose, can have a free or no cost capability statement that you can search in. It's a little clunky, but it is a very powerful, and it's got a lot of companies in there, and you can search by different criteria. And so that you've got a lot of information there, so you can contact them, and you can list out, you can download the things in Excel so you can sort, find it. Let's say you only want California and New York, whatever, you can do that too. But also, you mentioned what else I should do to prepare. One is make sure you've got your registrations already done, so that if someone is looking at you, you register, you're ready to go. sam.gov right now for an entity registration, they are making it not necessarily more challenging, but they're making sure that more due diligence is done. They're going to make sure you're a real company. They're going to make sure you're a real person because of fraud and cybersecurity. So we need to do that. So that's one registration. Do you have to have any state registrations? Make sure you're done in that. What's your web page look like? Do you have a page for for government contracting? Do you have one that's government services? Let them know that you are interested in them. So, and under that, you'd have a capability statement. Capability statement basically is like kind of a 1-page resume of what your company does. No fluff. It can be just bullet point and tell them what I do and what you do. Don't compete on price, time, or quality. Those are given. See, it's like they assume that you already have those things. So how else do you compete? The other thing is get on LinkedIn, company and you. Government liaisons are to be on there along with their agencies. Follow them, track them, do a little, not necessarily stalking, but you're following, going what's going on. Go to the events that they're at, introduce yourself. There's a lot of ways that you can get in front of these people so that they know what you do and they keep your information.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just
Go ahead. Sorry, Rob.
What Kathy and Mike and Nicole have already said, just as an FYI, in case people are unaware. Besides the Apex accelerators who can help try to navigate you through these different agencies and how to find some of this information, understand that at least at the federal level, that you have these offices of small business development and utilization, OSDBUs is what they are referred to as. And their whole purpose in life is to try to make the whole government contracting experience less off-putting and less offensive, and try to make it at least a little more user-friendly. So that's always a resource for you. Everybody's got one, depending upon the different agencies you're looking at. But then also, too, these agencies have specific individuals whose job is to do nothing more than to connect and be the liaison between industry and their particular agency. So these are the particular individuals that you can search on the website for. They're either called SBS, Small Business Specialists, or SBLOs, Small Business Liaison Officers, or in some cases you may actually have an ombudsman or something like that. And they're the ones that are supposed to be there specifically to be your ally, your resource, your advocate of small business or businesses in general to the government.
Great. Small business specialist, small business, what was the other one?
Small Business Liaison Officer and an ombudsman.
We also have someone on the session with us. Rachel, I've seen your question. I'm going to put an email out after this session. Rachel believes that she can help you with the medical segment, and I'll put you in touch. And Rachel believes you may do some business together, Rick.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, and also, Rick, just one other piece that I forgot while we were talking about how to find those VA companies, certified companies, the veteran-owned small business or service-disabled veteran-owned small business. There is a directory that now exists. It used to be under the VA. It was called the Vets First Directory or Small Biz. That's now been taken over by the SBA. But at that particular website, there is a specific directory where you can search on nothing but companies that are certified as veteran-owned or service-disabled veteran-owned.
Yeah, it's under the SBA site called Vet Cert now. So Google SBA Vet Cert and you'll find that site.
Cert as in certification? Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that
and
like
I can also put you in touch, Rick, with all of the folks who are panelists today, and any can certainly take this further offline.
Okay. Thank you.
So thank you for joining us, Rick, and you can come back to us a little bit later once we fielded some more questions, and please do stay on with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and in terms of everyone else out there, I just want to let 3 people in particular know we're coming to you soon. So Chris, you, Edward, as well as Chris, Edward, and Tommy. So we're coming to you folks next, and I will just tell you that we had several people say they would make it today who are not here. So if you didn't speak with me yesterday about participating today, if you have questions, just raise your hand. So we're going to go to a question that was sent in the chat in a moment. I just want to read off a quick spot, and this is about RSM Federal. So RSM Federal is an award-winning coaching and consulting firm that works with government contractors to accelerate their growth in the government market and increase revenue. RSM Federal specializes in advanced tactics and strategies that are tailored for each client. Over the last 15 years, RSM Federal's clients have won over $14.6 billion in direct awards and more than $30 billion in IDIQs. Whether you're brand new to the market or have 20 years experience, RSM Federal can help you to meet your needs and exceed your expectations. To learn more about RSM Federal, please visit rsmfederal.com. So we have a question, and this was sent anonymously, and I can appreciate why this would need to remain anonymous. There's someone who's looking to understand the resources or how this person can identify 8A companies for native tribes focusing on IT. So companies with expiring 8As in the 4 to 10 million revenue range, I guess revenue to the company. If you were looking to identify companies that had those attributes, does anyone here have an idea about how to go about that? Is there a list of 8A companies? Is that public or is that not public?
Unfortunately not. It's not that it's not public information, Nick. It's just that for whatever reason, the Small Business Administration refuses to release it. I've counseled numerous clients in the past who are considering getting their 8A, and we talk to them about what the requirements are. And one of the things that they erroneously assume is that they're going to be assigned a mentor, and they're not. You have to come into the 8A program with a mentor pre-selected, somebody who has either been in the 8A program or a graduate of it, in order to, it's not a requirement. The chances of your success in being able to scale your business up to the levels after 9 years that the SBA is looking to do through the program is going to be best be achieved with a mentor. You can try to go it alone, but usually the success rate falls way short. So yeah, we've asked, can you give us a list of companies that we can go talk to and see if they're willing to mentor us? No, they won't release it.
Well, let me ask a different question. And Nicole, you may have an opinion on this, or Kathy, or you may know something here. Isn't it true that all Native American organizations are automatically 8A? Or is that not the case?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So not necessarily. There are some exceptions that that Native American, mostly tribal owned ANCs and NHOs, so Native Hawaiian organizations and Alaskan Native corporations and other tribally owned entities do get some exceptions from affiliation based on common ownership and a couple things like that. They still do have to go through the process to be an official 8A. It is easier for them often. And as far as kind of that automatic 8A, so when you talk about just a Native American individual owning a company, that does give them an automatic qualification as long as their tribe is one that is recognized by the SBA for what is social disadvantage. So social disadvantage is one of the several, yep, that's what you're talking about,
That's
Nick.
what I was thinking of.
Yep, that's one of the 4 or 5 different requirements, but those are the requirements for individuals. One is economic disadvantage, social disadvantage, then the company itself needs to show potential for success, needs to be a small business, U.S. citizens. There's several other small ones out there, good standing, but that is an automatic on that social disadvantage, and that is a huge leg up for Native Americans because of the fact, and anyone else that qualifies for one of those socially disadvantaged groups. And I can tell you where that list is at too in just a second. But it is a leg up because you do not have to write the social disadvantage narrative, and vast majority of the denied 8A program applicants out there are denied for social disadvantage. Very many are denied because their narrative, while it may provide reasons that they struggled to get where they needed to get, they still didn't demonstrate. It's really all about bias. You have to demonstrate bias and discrimination. And so if you can demonstrate that through a very extensive narrative most of the time, SBA will allow you to meet that qualification. So it is an advantage to have one of those designated groups and be able to say, I'm a part of this group. I don't have to write the narrative. And then, yeah, for the tribal owned entities, there are several really helpful, amazing exceptions out there for certain requirements that a individual owned company will have to meet that a tribal owned entity would not have to meet to be considered part of the 8A program.
Well, that's fantastic. And I wonder if the advice that we can give to this person is, isn't it true that on SamGov, you can look up which companies are representing themselves as Native American? Isn't that true?
You can also, there are some, I'm wondering is the SBA profile, DSBS might have some things that you could look at. The other thing is connect with the Native American PTAC/Apex. They will probably have that. The other option is your SBA office, your state SBA office, your district office in your state, or whatever state you're looking. Let's say if you're looking for whatever, they would, because they have to do yearly reports on these organizations, what they're doing, what's going on, how they're progressing. So they have to have those reports. So that might be an option too, to find them.
I think, Kathy, that was fantastic advice on several different fronts. And I was also going to mention something Nick mentioned and Kathy mentioned, one being the SAM will show you who is 8A. So no, like Robert said, it's very unfortunate there's not a wonderful, nice list out there like there is for SDVOSBs where you can go see who all qualifies as 8A. But if you found a company that, you know, was in your location, you were looking toward doing the services you were looking at, and you wanted to know if they were 8A, they would usually, unless there was some kind of issue with SAM, be represented as 8A in SAM. And yes, as Kathy said, you can also talk to your local SBA rep is a really good way to do that. A lot of times they will have a lot of information on Native American organizations that are near you or do what you do. And then the other one, which is probably kind of funny for most, but is a simple Google search. Look up Native American 8A companies in your state and wherever. Sometimes you will find pretty good websites that lead you to certain companies. And then the only other thing I would suggest, because we did talk a little bit about mentor protéging, and yes, a lot of people are super interested in either finding a mentor. And as Robert said, an 8A graduate is a fantastic mentor for a young 8A company, or vice versa. You have a young or you have a graduated mentor looking for a new 8A company so that it can get its hands on more 8A work, or even non-graduated, just another company looking to work with an 8A company in order to get some 8A work. And the good thing there when you do that mentor protege agreement is that you have the ability to joint venture, you have the ability to have all kinds of assistance going back and forth. The bad thing is it is very hard often to find a mentor or protege. The other thing is sometimes you see companies agree to these mentor protege relationships, and not very often, but sometimes they go south and you have issues where the protege feels like they're being taken advantage of by the mentor, or the mentor isn't getting what from the protege what it would like to get as far as work and things like that. So one thing I will throw out there, recommend, if you find a company you think you might want to team with via like a mentor protege agreement for the 8A program, is to do a subcontract with them first. Do something with them first to make sure that you work well together. And when you find an 8A company that you work well with, and that is when you think, okay, great, we can do lots more work together. I just highly recommend kind of making sure that you're familiar with the company, comfortable with the company. And like Kathy said too, that you can get online and see that they have made all the assertions you want to see a company make, and they're registered in SAM. Don't take someone at their word. Definitely go make sure they're 8A on SAM and things like that. And that's all really good ways to team with an 8A company. As far as finding your 8A company, that is where it gets a little trickier.
And I'm reading the question as they're asking us, let us restate the original question. Is there any way to search for an expiring 8A? I'm not sure if they give the list saying that you're year 5, year 7, year 9. That will lose the 8A over the next year, and search by revenue range. I'm not sure, unless it's a public company. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, and I just have something to add here for this attendee, and I understand why you're asking this question the way you're asking it, because if the company is going to lose their status and they have past performance in IT, well, there's a reason why they might want to do business with you, or a reason why they might want to sell their company. I would just encourage you to look at some of the other things that we've talked about on this call, such as joint venture agreements, mentor protege agreements, because you might be able to get what you're trying to get without buying that company. So I would start with identifying what are the native organizations, what are the disadvantaged organizations that you can find on SamGov, and you can find those on SamGov. Look in your area, look in certain industries, and approach them on the basis of teaming with them or doing a joint venture or mentor protege arrangement. If you happen to be a user of our website, feel free to reach out to me and we'll take this further. So
Nick, just a quick footnote is that the DSBS, Dynamic Small Business Search, does allow you to search for 8A companies. You can pull them up in all different ways. If you want to do by county, city, whatever, it'll give you a whole list of the current 8A certified companies.
Super quick from me too. I can't remember whether it is SAM or the DSBS, but one of them does say the year of graduation for 8As. It says expiration in whatever year. I can't remember which one right now, but I'm pretty sure one of them does. Really quick also, it is that list of who's socially disadvantaged that we talked about is going to be at section 13 CFR 124.103. So for anybody that wanted to go look and see if they qualify there. And then like as Nick said, buying an 8A company is actually a pretty tricky situation. There's a lot of strict rules in the 8A program that require termination of 8A contracts and things like that. Novations are extremely difficult in the 8A program. So finding those teaming opportunities is often a way better option than trying to buy an 8A company.
Well said. And just a couple of housekeeping notes. Some of the other panelists have been pasting links. I'm going to repaste those so that everyone can see those. That's number one. And unfortunately, we lost Mike. He has a personal matter of an urgent nature, so he will not be coming back to us, and we wish him luck with that. And so next, we're going to go to Chris Nicholson. So Chris, let's make you a panelist. See if I did it correctly. We may have lost Chris. Just give me a moment. Is that you, Chris?
Yes, sir.
All right, Chris, welcome to MyGovWatch Live. What do you do and where do you do it from?
My name is Chris Nicholson. We are a asset-based logistics company here out of Phoenix, Arizona.
Asset-based logistics?
Yep. So
All
we're
right.
a company that moves with dry vans, reefers, and flatbeds.
Well, the government needs a lot of things moved by flatbed truck, let me tell you. So before we go further, Chris, I don't know if you heard the little game we're playing. We're just asking you to guess. By the way, since Mike will not be rejoining us, Mike is the person who regularly catches yellowtail off the coast of the Coronado Islands in Mexico. So there's that one answer. So the next one will be, which of the remaining co-hosts has not one, but 2 holes in one on a golf course?
Other than myself, probably Nick.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner. So we won't bore anyone with the hour-long conversation we can have about how you get 2 holes in one, but I will reach out to you after today's session because I want to hear that story as well. So I understand, Chris, that you were looking to talk about making contacts. Who are the right contacts to make? And I think, maybe we should deal with this one first. This is an easy one. This is a legal question. So Nicole, Chris was wondering about contacting a person, or Chris, maybe you can ask the question, who do you contact if the main contact for an RFP is not responding to you?
It's pretty much the same. I mean, I've asked questions about, the load itself and like the requirements and the dimensions, and the procurement officer doesn't answer you. So the next best bet is go after the buyer. How do I find the buyer?
Yeah, that's a really fantastic question, and one that I think unfortunately we see too often. A couple thoughts on that. So one, sometimes in a solicitation, you will see not only a contracting officer, but a COR, a contracting officer specialist, anyone else listed in there. Feel free to reach out to them if the CO is being unresponsive. Agencies very frequently flip-flop between different COs. Sometimes they don't even tell you. Sometimes you email a CO and find out they're not the CO anymore. All of that said, there's not a super easy answer. Generally, reaching out to the agency itself, going to someone a little higher up and explaining, hey, I am an offer on this contract, or I'm on this contract and the CO is being unresponsive. There is something you can also point to there that is a requirement. It is called the implied duty of good faith and fair dealing. And what that is it's an implied term in every contract. Doesn't matter if the government contract mentions it or not, it is in there. And it basically says the CO has a duty to respond to you. The agency has a duty to respond to you as a contractor. And then as an offerer, you're not in contract with the government yet, so that duty doesn't apply. But in that situation as an offerer, the agency has an obligation to treat all offers equally and make sure information is provided equally to all offers. So those are both ways for you to, I'm not saying to, put yourself in a super adversarial position, especially if you are an offerer. That's never really a good idea, but you can politely nudge someone else in the agency that the listed CO is not responding. If for whatever reason it's changed, please let me know who to contact, because if you're an offerer, you need to request some information that you think is going to be important. You don't want to have to file a pre-award protest regarding the solicitation to figure things out. You'd rather just communicate with the CO to make sure you know what's going on, since that is allowed as long as they are, again, sharing the information equally. And then if you are under contract and your CO is being unresponsive, it's a pretty big deal. So that is when you can reach out to anyone within the agency. I'm not saying they're all going to respond, but at some point, someone typically will. When they start seeing you throw around that implied duty of good faith and fair dealing, they're going to get concerned that they're going to end up at the Board of Contract Appeals with you, and they're going to make sure somebody responds to you most of the time.
Yep, got it. So if you don't contact them, threaten them. Got it.
Didn't say that. Yep, didn't say that at all. But yes, yeah, something to that extent.
Yeah, because this contract, we just started kind of, and we're trying to do at least some state, so we get some reputableness on us, but he hasn't contacted me, so I was wondering the best way to do that. And
I think that the best bet from and this isn't necessarily legal advice, but more just, good old human advice, is kind of giving multiple outs. So reaching out and saying, hey, I guess there's a chance the CO changed. There's a chance something came up and for whatever reason, the CO is out of office and I'm not getting that out of office notification, giving them the ability to make it right without jumping straight to, I might take you guys to court, but simply saying, hey, I know that there is a duty for the government to respond to me as a contractor on a government contract. So if it's not this CO or if there's something going on with this CO, please let me know who to contact in their absence. Something like that, to where you're not being threatening or adversarial, but you are very much making sure they know, your rights, and someone needs to talk to you.
Got it.
Robert or Kathy, anything to add to that?
No, she did a great job.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and so Chris, do you have follow-up questions? And I will just tell you folks, we're just at about an hour. Typically we go 90 minutes. I thought maybe we would go over today if there are a lot of questions. There are just fewer people who promised to be on today's session than we expected. So Chris, now's the time. Do you have some follow-up questions, things that you think maybe we'd like to go further on?
Well, I wish I didn't miss the first 18 minutes, so I don't know what you guys talked about. I don't know if we over anything.
Okay.
The general sense, of course, you got SAM.gov, SPDS, you have other places, you have the DoD. In the general sense, though, there's no like specific, other than the DoD, specific contracts just for transporting, is there? If you guys.
Well, there may be, and it actually, I have to use this moment to talk about a press release that we issued yesterday, because we talked about an example in that press release that had to do with flatbed trucking, and you were sort of the real person. I used a hypothetical. There was a solicitation recently, and I should probably just share this on my screen as I'm going through this scenario. And let me do that. Hold on. That will be here. So this is a press release that we issued yesterday, and the issue is NAICS code. So there are certainly federal government purchases and certainly state and local purchases where they need logistics and trucking. But
Yes.
In the article that links to this press release, we found a solicitation on SamGov where they actually needed a vendor to not only transport boat vehicles around the country or boats around the country using flatbed trucks, they also needed someone to store and maintain them and also appraise them. So I imagine you don't do all of those things.
I mean, of course we have warehouses, but I mean, as far as appraising a boat, absolutely not.
Yeah, so here's a fundamental challenge with federal contracting. They're required.
It's a lot one.
Yes. And so the challenge, and this is why we put this release out, is that the federal government must apply one NAICS code to every solicitation. So there may be many solicitations out there that include flatbed trucking, or where you could be a vendor or team with someone or be a subcontractor, because maybe trucking is one part of it or warehousing is one part of it, but it's not the principal work. So that's something that we studied in the last 90 days. And we found that the good news is 62% of the time when the federal government assigns a NAICS code to a bid, they're correct. It's exactly right. But there's a percentage of them where it's not correct, or as this subheading lists, at least 22% of them, really more than one activity is happening. So it's not easy to always identify, is trucking or is warehousing a part of a solicitation? So there are ways that we get around that at MyGovWatch. I don't want to make this too promotional, but we can have an offline conversation about how our site works and how you can find RFPs on our site, or how you can use SAM directly if you want to try to do that and not use a commercial provider.
Understood.
All right, so Chris, stay with us, and maybe I'll keep you as a panelist. And I just want to see if we have, let's just go back to, let me go back to sharing. Let's end this share. Okay. All right, there it is. Stop share. Okay, so at this point, we still have lots of folks on the call with us. I know that Tommy Norton, I'm going to promote you, and I'm also going to promote Edward Chavan. So folks, I spoke with both of you, and you had obviously, not a great idea of what questions you might ask on a session like this, but I'm just going to promote you both. And Chris, I'm going to leave you as a panelist, and let's just see if we can generate some organic questions at this point. And let's see if that worked. So we still have Chris. And Tommy and Edward, if you're there with us, I'm inviting you to become a panelist. And just while we're waiting for them to accept, I'm just going to read a short piece. So this is about Nicole's firm. So Co-Prince McCall Potroff is a boutique federal government contracting law firm located in Lawrence, Kansas. If government contracting is important to your business, you owe it to yourself to work with attorneys who understand the government's complex rules, regulations, and processes. Co-Prince McCall Potroff provides comprehensive legal solutions to federal government contractors, period. But just because they're focused does not mean their practice is narrow. If you need legal assistance with a federal government contracting matter, they can probably help. And in those few cases where they can't, they can probably refer you to someone who can. To contact Co-Prince McCall Potroff for assistance, call 785-200-8919 or email info@coprince.com. And so we have not had Edward or Tommy join us yet. So before we go further, can I just ask any of the panelists, Nicole or Kathy or Robert, maybe I'll pull this back up and maybe ask, do you have any, are you surprised at all by this study that we've released, or did you get a chance to look at that earlier and did you have any questions about it? Or how do you think this affects federal bidding?
I can start there. Certainly was not surprised. We had, Nick and I had quite a few conversations about this topic based on some of our blogs and some of Nick's really amazing, interesting research that he did through different algorithms and things that are far above my head. But it's not surprising to me, the amount of clients that come to me, and I will say kind of on both fronts. One sometimes is we think that the agency doesn't really know what they're doing here. You know, we are the industry experts a lot of times, and that's why agencies hire people to write solicitations for them. They don't necessarily know the ins and outs of certain kinds of work. So it is not, you know, their job to know all of that, but it is important that they have someone knowledgeable assigning these NAICS codes, because it is very easy to wrongly assign them. And it's not just a simple wrong NAICS code, no big deal, as you're probably all aware, but some of you are newer, may not be. A wrong NAICS code can make you ineligible for the contract. It can increase or decrease a size standard. It can make the competition different. It can be a pretty dramatic issue. While you are able to get on your SAM and say that you have a primary NAICS code and then list many other NAICS codes as secondary ones, and generally you're not going to be excluded from bidding on something maybe you don't have listed, it can also be a protest ground. We see that a lot where someone is awarded something and does not list the NAICS code. It is definitely a situation where they can be protested as whoever believes is not the best offer for the solicitation if they don't list that NAICS code. So there's a lot of strong implications for having the wrong NAICS code. And we see it all the time. And then on the other side of things, and again, this is, I hope it's not the case, but I definitely have people come complain to me fairly regularly that they sometimes feel that NAICS codes are being assigned purposefully incorrectly for whatever reason to allow bidding of different companies. And if that is a situation, again, really do truthfully hope that's not the case. I am all about the presumption. We want to assume that and this is a true presumption in the courts and GAO, if you're not aware. We presume that all government officials are acting in good faith and that they are not doing anything that involves bias or favoritism. There are strict rules in the FAR, the SICA, lots of other statutes and laws out there about that. But if that is the case, and if either of those tends to be a situation that you see one where you think it was incorrectly assigned because someone didn't have the information they needed to assign the correct one, or if you feel that one may have been assigned due to favoritism or something like that, those are really good opportunities for you to do a NAICS appeal. So keep in mind that, yes, it could cost a little money. It's not generally as extensive as some of the litigation we see for GAO protests and things like that. But just appealing the NAICS code, saying we don't believe this is the right NAICS code. I have had a lot of success where it seemed to be a simple case of misunderstanding. And once someone who had been doing, you've got contractors out here that have been doing the same work for 30, 40 years, they read a solicitation and say, whoa, this is not right. You have people like Nick who do this for a living and go look at these opportunities and match them with companies. And it's easy for people like Nick and these long-term contractors to see this and say, we know this is wrong and we don't think the agency knows this. And you don't have to get dramatic with it. There's also always an option to simply reach out without an official litigation. Reach out to the CO and say, hey, really quick, we just had a thought and we were curious what your reasoning behind assigning this was. Sometimes I have seen multiple situations where all we did was notify in a non-adversarial manner, notify the agency that we thought the NAICS code was wrong. And I typically do suggest giving some kind of fallback in if you were to do it that way, kind of we hope to not have to protest this, but we do realize proposals are due on whatever date. So if we don't hear back from you by then, we might have to protest. Something to that extent, just so they know that if they don't respond to you, you are likely to file a protest. If that is your plan, it's okay to be open about that. You kind of, I guess, on the one hand, might have this poker man mentality of you don't want to show your hand, but really in the protest world, that's not typically the case. Often letting the government know that you plan to protest, like I said, sometimes it is a simple, oh, we were wrong. Thank you. Somebody who knows much more about this area of work than we do showed us the light here, and we are happy to amend the solicitation, amend the NAICS code. So it doesn't have to be a huge piece of litigation in your life. It can be a simple, let's see if I can change something. But no, I am not surprised one bit that we've got a lot of incorrect assignment of NAICS code out there. Again, if every agency assigning these solicitations certain NAICS code happened to be a Nick Bernardo or a PTAC counselor who worked in this field for a long time, or a contractor who has been doing this in the industry for 30 years, then you would assume they would be much more accurate. But these are government officials. They have a lot of duties, knowing everything about the industry they're asking for work in, and they're assigning these acquisitions in is not necessarily their duty. It's often someone else's. So bringing attention to the matter can be a really great solution in that situation.
For sure. And I guess, and that's helpful, because I think it'll help Chris, at least federally, understand, what can happen if there's a NAICS code that's incorrectly assigned. So Kathy and Robert, how much of your guidance to people who come for help is centered around looking at previous spending using NAICS or future spending using NAICS? Like, does that come up all the time, or is it less frequent?
For us, it's quite frequent. It's one of, if you will, the due diligence is make sure you're reading through things. If you're bidding on, are you prepared to bid on? And I'm going to piggyback on Nicole. Is, a lot of times I don't think the officers are doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
I think that they do what we have found on some of them. They copy paste and don't realize something from transportation is with food, and vice versa. So it's like, the one thing I suggest is when you write to a contract officer, including what Nicole said, is ask them, is this like, to verify, so they don't have to have a long answer. It's like, can you confirm that you were really looking for dog food when it said you were going to have cafeteria food? Could you just make sure that that's really what you were looking for? I know that would never happen, that one, but we have odd things, but no, we do a lot of research with them. It's like, okay, who's did what in the past, what's going on, read the solicitation. And by the way, did I mention read the solicitation, and, mark it up and go through it several times. So.
Yeah. And so Chris, is it helpful to you if I say to you that, you have usaspending.gov, and that's a place you can look to see prior spending, right?
Yes, I know that website very well.
You're aware of that one.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
And so SamGov is for current solicitations.
Correct.
So is this helpful in terms of understanding that you may sometimes be a prime contractor, right? Yeah. Identifying things within NAICS codes. You may sometimes be a sub, and you may sometimes have a contract like the one on the screen, which is referenced in what we wrote recently, where you would be one. You either do all of these things, or you would be part of a team, or you would be a sub. So I'm just wondering if all this is making sense.
Yeah, all of it did. And it makes sense. And in that sense, the best sense would be a subcontractor to move the transportation. And then you have the appraisal do it. And then, whoever won the actual contract, talk to them, which you can also see on USA Spending. But my next question, if this can help. So each entity, there's SAM.gov, which is like the main EID when you get your EIN, that affiliates with all government agencies, but each agency has their own requirements, correct?
Federal. So I would just say so SAM.gov is federal, and I'm just going to let anyone else on the panel comment on the rest. And if you could rephrase the second part of that question.
So in the general sense, like you get your SAM.gov, right? That's your federal, and then moving way down, like you get DoD loads, you have to sign up a whole new process for that. I mean, what about, Department of Agriculture and other places? I mean, do they just go through the contract, or do you have to go through their procurement offices as well? If that makes sense.
I have some thoughts, but I don't want to. Go ahead, Kathy, please. Or
I
Nicole.
said, Robert, I think also had some, mine is federal is federal. They follow the FAR, they follow the FAR. There's no like something special unless the agency is like looking for something very specific like CMMC too.
Okay.
But it's all federal.
Got it.
So Robert?
Yeah, definitely. For everybody's edification, when you're talking about federal and you're talking about state, I always tell clients that's the easiest. It's the hardest, but it's also the easiest of trying to get into doing business with that particular group of agencies. And the reason why is because it's kind of a cookie cutter approach. In order to do any business with any federal organization, no matter what it is, agency, you got to be in SAM. You don't pass go, you don't collect $200 kind of thing. And it's the same thing at the state level. You do one point of entry and it gets you exposure and access to all the others. What I would tell you is that, just like Kathy was mentioning, one size fits all at the state and the federal level. But like, for instance, we've got disaster contracting coming up with FEMA, because for us in Texas, it's going to be hurricane season here in a couple of weeks. It's going to start. So we want to get everybody briefed and ready to get going. But so, for instance, in FEMA's situation, yes, you need to be in SAM, but then they have a specific set of documents and things that they want you to submit that's specific to FEMA. That's additional registration with them. Right. So on the one hand, there may not necessarily be anything else you have to do. And if there is anything, it will be listed specifically in the solicitation or the bid, RFP, RFQ, whatever it might be, that enumerates what those are, like having to be registered and ready to go in PI and the wide area workflow for you to submit your invoicing and get paid, those kinds of systems, to have your DODAX and these other codes and things that you might need. But the point is that if there's any additional things that a specific agency may require of you, then they will let you know that, either through the solicitation or, you need to go through their Office of Small Business Development Utilization or their small business specialist, the SBLO, whoever it is, to be able to find out what it is. Usually your Apex accelerators can also help you try to navigate that as well.
Understood.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll add, I think those are absolutely fantastic answers. The only thing I will add is, yeah, as Kathy said, generally federal is federal. You've got a giant set of federal acquisition regulations, the FAR, that applies to all federal work. Within the FAR, you also have some specific agency sectors, the DFARs, the Defense Agency FAR. There is a I'm blanking on some of the others. There's one for the aviation services. There's definitely different sections, and like Robert said, those are going to be in the solicitation. So you'll often see the FAR clauses that you have listed in your solicitation that will apply to your contract, and then you'll see some DFARs or whatever specific to that agency. So there's that, and then there's also kind of its own world is the GSA schedule side of things. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but they do a lot of things a little differently. There are some rules that only apply to GSA schedules. There's certain teaming agreement. There you can be in a team arrangement that is called a CTA specific to GSA schedule holders. There's a lot of specific rules for GSA schedules. And through those, as you are probably aware, a lot of different buyers can jump on and buy stuff, but you do have to make sure you're not only complying with the federal acquisition regulations and everything there, but you're also doing anything GSA needs you to do. You need to be a schedule holder for certain things, for certain teaming, for certain bids. And the solicitation should indicate what all of those are. If there's any confusion, again, great time to reach out to the contracting officer. Hey, I haven't done work for DoD before, and I just want to make sure there's nothing that's not listed here that I need to be aware of. Being in SAM does give you that ability to bid on most everything federal, again, with the exception of some GSA schedules and things like that, where you have to also be registered there. And then the other types of certifications that may be required. The other thing that was kind of noted earlier in the presentation, I don't know if you were on yet or not, is things like for the VA. Once you're registered in SAM and you're a federal contractor, can you just go bid on a bunch of VA work? You can, but VA does have requirements to give preference at least to service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses and VOSBs. So it is sometimes there's additional steps in there and there's additional certifications and things. So can you just bid on every federal opportunity out there if you're in SAM? No, but is that the way you start? And then you slowly navigate into which areas you are allowed to bid in, and based on your solicitation, figure out what you need to do for each one. That's definitely how you get there.
Thank you.
So Chris, you continue to have a captive audience. Folks, I'll encourage you to raise your hands here for the last 10 minutes. But Chris, let me ask you a question, and certainly we can go further with some of your questions. But which panelist here, I'll give you two options. Which panelist do you believe has a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo? You know it's not me. And which is a semi-professional kickball player?
Semi-professional? My friends are semi-professionals too. That's funny. I didn't think that was a thing until they said it. I was like, oh, that's real.
Oh, it's a thing.
Nicole's the black belt, and Kathy's the kickball player.
You have it exactly opposite.
Opposite?
Yes, yes. So how long have you been doing Taekwondo, Kathy?
I got my black, there's actually, most people don't know, there's 10 degrees to a black belt in Taekwondo. So I have first degree. So there's several advanced stages you can go. I've held it for about 20 years. I'm not seeking the next levels or anything, but I enjoy it as an activity for fitness.
Absolutely.
So the gym I belong to is a kickbox and strength training gym. So it's fun. It's just fun.
Sounds exhausting.
I knew it was Kathy. I knew it. I knew it.
And so apparently some money's changed hands with the kickballing.
Yeah, so semi-professional is definitely the right term for it. It's funny. It's actually how I met my husband, and my maid of honor, and probably half my wedding party is all through my kickball community. But started playing in a local league, and then just had a really, really crazy, awesome chick, athletic girl come up to me and say, hey, do you want to play on our traveling women's team? We're semi-professional. We win. If we win tournaments, I think top 4 or something like that. Sometimes like all the way to top 10 wins some amount of money. It's nothing substantial. It mostly pays for your trip, your uniforms, things like that. But I said, well, heck yeah, and joined. And we are Lisa Frank Kickball as a women's team, which anyone from my generation probably knows that was the fun. It was the like leopard print and rainbow print and all the fun school supplies back in the day. And our jerseys reflect that, and they're amazing. And I also play on a great co-ed team called Tempo. So yes, a lot of fun, great way to meet people. We joke all the time, there's engineers, there's doctors, there's lawyers that people never guess. They kind of assume we're all slackers just out there playing semi-pro kickball. But really, it's a great way to network and meet people. And I mean, it's how I found the love of my life. So pretty cool.
Well, that's great. And I can just imagine a bunch of kickballers sitting around, and one of them might say to the other, who do you think here is secretly a doctor?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And yes, definitely surprising sometimes. Yep.
Yeah.
Or someone's yelling at a ref and someone's, reaches over to you and goes, did you know that guy was a pastor? Pretty interesting. That was an actual event that happened at one point. So kind of fun.
Well, thanks for sharing. And by default, that makes Robert the person who makes his own stained glass. How long have you been doing that, Robert?
Oh, wow. It's probably been a good 10 years or so.
What's the hardest thing about it that someone wouldn't know unless they tried?
That's a good question. It can be tedious if you're not into not just detail oriented work, but also if you're impatient or you like to see results quickly. Probably not the best hobby for you. It's one of these things that the glass is unforgiving. So the different types. A lot of people don't know it. I didn't know until I got involved. That the way that the colors of glass are made is that it's just regular glass, but then they add a particular element. And when you add, for instance, cobalt, it makes the glass, I think it's green. Surprisingly, it's not necessarily the types of color combinations. Gold makes glass red, those kinds of things. So these glass, it's one of these things where you can only, glass is very unforgiving in terms of what you can do with it. So when you really look at some of these more intricate pieces that have curves and all kinds of things, they're a very significant challenge to try to get the glass to want to cooperate. But it's fun. It's if you've got an artsy craftsy kind of side, more creative kind of side, it's a great outlet to be able to, it's a lost art. You don't see it very much anymore.
I know it's a very old discipline, and then I've heard it said many times that correlation, it does not equal causality. But I would think that somebody who knows so much about government contracting and the tedious things in government contracting, there is a connection there.
Indeed. And I know Kathy and certainly Nicole can, as well as an attorney, talk to the fact that, what we do day in and day out for 8+ hours a day is so left brain, just kind of that stuff that, you leave all torqued and twisted. You need to go see the chiropractor and try to get, some of the kinks worked out. That you got to have these kinds of hobbies, whether it's kickboxing or whether it's the taekwondo or the kickball, whatever, stained glass, just something to release.
I like to hit golf balls, and I know Chris does too. So, Chris, obviously, we're going to wrap it up here in a few minutes, and this does not need to be the end of the conversation. We can have an offline conversation as well about some other things, state and locally. If you need some help finding opportunities, we can talk about that. But do you have maybe some other questions that might have sprung up as we've gone through some of these things?
At this point, pretty much, I would love to learn more about the state and local. Obviously you have the state, then you have the counties, then you have even the smaller cities. So, I've tried a couple of other, all the routes and signed up for all the procurement pages, but it's just a lot.
It's a lot. And, and I'm not trying to be overly promotional here, but what sites like ours do is they go out to thousands of websites every night, put all the data into a database, and then figure out who should see what, whether it be from SamGov or from, a small sewer authority in New Mexico. So
right.
That's why people do it.
Pretty well thought out. I saw it.
Well, thank you for that. And so, folks, I'll just say we're almost at 90 minutes. We just have a handful of people on the line. I don't know how attentive you are. If you have any remaining questions at this point, now would be the time to raise your hand. And just while we're waiting for that, if any of the panelists, why don't we do this? Each of the panelists, can you maybe just say how folks can reach out to you? And I don't know if there's any parameters for, who, Kathy, you're allowed to speak with versus Robert, but maybe you can just say, how people can reach you and who should be contacting you versus Kathy, Robert.
Actually, contact your Apex in your state. We are restricted to work with companies in our state. So if you're from North Dakota, please connect with me. You can just Google North. Right now, you still need to do North Dakota PTAC/Apex to find that. But yeah, so we are restricted. So if you call from Texas, I'm going to ship you down to Robert. So you might as well connect with Robert first in that respect. I do have one parting comment is make sure you can be found. Your company can be found. Don't make your SAM registration private. You think by private, it would just allow government agencies to find you. And Robert's going, no. They can't. That's only very restrictive. And so if you can't be found, you won't get the work. So please make sure your information is up to date and it is public. They will never show sensitive information. They never will. And thank you very much for letting me join you. It was very fun.
Absolutely. Robert, how can people find you? I guess by Google, or do you have any other parting thoughts?
And there, to echo what Kathy mentioned, out of the, there's 96 separate and distinct Apex accelerators across the country that have about 300 centers associated with them. And so the idea is if you go to the APTAC website, which is the Association of Procurement Technical Assistance Centers that we belong to as a group, because we haven't renamed ourselves yet, you can actually, and you see Nick had dropped the website address there for you. If you click on that map on the upper left corner of the screen, you can find your local Apex accelerator. About 12 or 15 of us, I think it is, across the country. Texas is included in that. California is too. Our regional Apex accelerators. So while Kathy is a statewide program where they have their central location and they have particular offices throughout the state, Texas happens to be regional, which means we have 7 different Apex accelerators in the state of Texas. We have a defined geography, number of counties that we serve. Each one else serves a different number. In our case, it's 14 counties, and we're not supposed to go outside of that. However, with that being said, you are allowed to choose to work with other Apex accelerators. So if you are working with one currently that's considered your local resource and you wish to do business in other states or that kind of thing, you're more than welcome to also get signed up with a client with them as well in those particular other areas. So they can work together. And if you happen to be Native American, you can also be a member of your local Apex accelerator and also a member of the, it's broken out by the Bureau of Indian Affairs regions of the regional Indian Apex accelerator as well. Part of how would be simply that, this isn't rocket science, government contracting at any level. It's not, top secret. It's just a matter of being persistent. It's a matter of trying to get down into figuring out what it is that the government wants. The clients that we have the greatest difficulty with are those who think they know better than we do, or better than the government, or those that don't want to take our advice or to listen, or they want to think there's shortcuts that are out. Can't tell you, and I'm sure Kathy has her own stories too, about how many times we get people in here saying, well, I read a book on Amazon, or I saw this YouTube video about the middleman strategy, or how to hack my time and get to government contracting in 6 easy steps. It's not the way it works. If you're willing to put in the time, if you're willing to take our advice, then you can be successful. I've seen it happen personally where I've had somebody have virtually no experience and just within a year going to be a major prime contractor in the roofing industry and getting international projects with the federal government. So we're here to help demystify all of that, but also Apex accelerators can help you get small business certified. So if you happen to, like in Texas, you have the Texas Historically Underutilized Business certification, but any of the federal ones we talked about, veteran-owned, woman-owned, hub zone, or 8A, any of that, we can help you also go through the application process and make a sense of how that whole process works and what you need to do to get qualified and get your application submitted. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource, the Apex Accelerator community. So Kathy and Robert, thank you for joining us. And Nicole, before we sign off, I just want to mention, you guys have this great blog. We did read your spot, so they have the phone number for the firm, but what should people do to get your weekly, I think it's a weekly or bi-weekly email? Small GovCon?
Yeah, and thank you so much. I definitely appreciate that. We have the blog, we have books on Amazon. Couple out there, a couple new ones coming out too, all great resources. And if you simply email the info@coprince.com, I think is just the website that's given on or the link that's given on our website for our email. Rhonda is my amazing assistant. She will add you to the weekly newsletter. It's that simple. And then we will give you updates. We often include some of Nick's wonderful articles and things in our weekly newsletter too, because they're very, very relevant to what we do. And reaching out to us too, feel free to reach out to my personal email or to the info box. You can reach out to me with any questions that you have, just to kind of go off what Nick was just talking about too, where we all have our own niche. I am only federal. I cannot answer any state or local questions, so I will have to direct you to someone else that can. I also am I can't give legal advice unless and until you become a client. That doesn't mean I can't help. It's worth a try. Very often I can point you in the direction of a regulation. I can tell you, while I don't want to hear the specific facts of your situation and tell you yes or no on whether things are compliant, I can tell you generally what you should be looking at in a situation maybe similar to yours. So I have very carefully over the years learned to craft emails to help people out, and I'm happy to do so. And then if you do determine that you do need legal assistance from us, we can easily get you set up there. And I can give you more direct correspondence about what you need to do, whether you're compliant and things like that. And Robert made a great point. It may seem like one of those things, reaching out to every free resource you have is highly, highly recommended. Also reaching out to a government contracting attorney. If you are new to things, I can't speak any more highly of that. It doesn't have to be me, but somebody. The amount of money you will put forward upfront to make sure you have compliant agreements and things like that is nothing compared to the loss of contract awards, the potential debarment, the many other consequences that I've seen over the years, and even kind of taking it full circle here from our very first question, doing things like bidding far too low on a contract and you won, you're the winner, but are you really the winner if you end up losing massive amounts of money on a contract where you can't recover those additional funds? No. So that is why it's very, very helpful to make sure you have all the guidance before you start doing these things. It's a whole other world. The business world is, a beast of its own, but government contracting business, bigger rules, bigger consequences, all kinds of things out there that you should definitely be aware of. And you've got great resources right here. The last thing I'll say is, even if I become an attorney for a client, I am not ever in the business of charging somebody for information I don't need to charge them for. So that being said, we have fantastic relationships with many, many Apex accelerators around the nation. And I will always, I'm never going to charge you hourly rates to send you to an Apex accelerator for something that is in their niche and they can provide information on and help you with. Same with SBA representatives. So we always want to keep those relationships going, and I will send you off anytime I can. I will also send you things like blog articles, links to the $9 handbook on JVs or whatever it is that we're talking about, so that I can do my best to get that information out there, even if it's not me giving you direct legal advice. So even if you're sitting there watching this thinking, I want help, I just don't want to pay legal fees, because we all know how bad those can get, definitely consider reaching out anyways. I might be able to give you some great general advice. And if not, I can probably send you to somebody who can. Same with everyone else on here. So don't be afraid to just go ahead and try. You're definitely not gonna make any shots you don't take. So.
Well, that's a fantastic summary. And my parting thought is simply that the Apex Accelerator community, it's a wonderful resource for anyone. And there's sort of a fine line between going to, not-for-profit resources, government-funded resources, which certainly have their place, and then paid resources, whether it be for legal or consulting or bid notification. And it is a fine line. And part of understanding government contracting is knowing when to go to one or go to the other. And it's going to be different for every person out there, depending on what the need is. So with that said, folks, I want to thank all of you for joining us for today's edition of MyGovWatch Live. And remember, if you're not already a subscriber, start your free 14-day trial of MyGovWatch today. If you want to win more government contracts for less, you'll be glad you did. And thank you so much for joining us, folks. Have a good day.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us.